We're just going to wait for Mrs. Del Rio and just fly around. Alright, welcome Mrs. Del Real's class. Welcome to Mythical Monday. I hope you guys enjoyed your first myth. Today we are taking another tour. We have several more planned, but that is all dependent on how you guys score on your quizzes. So we need to make sure that we are paying attention. I greatly encourage you guys to note take along the way. Laptops should all be closed and we should be focused. So, starting out, we are going to head to our timeline here. Last class we talked about the Minoan Civilization. Today we are going to be talking about the Mycenaean Civilization. Now, if we recall back to the Minoan Civilization, the Minoans were around for quite a long time. Their civilization began around 2700 BCE and lasted for well over 1,000 years. Right towards the end of that tour, it mentioned how the Mycenaeans came to the island of Crete and conquered the Minoans. But a lot of that was mainly because the Minoans were devastated from a volcanic eruption. It wiped out a lot of their ports, and economically and socially they were really, really hurting. So today our focus is going to be the Mycenaean Civilization. We're going to learn a little bit about them. We'll be exploring the city of Mycenae and learning a little bit regarding King Agamemnon. Alright, so let's pay attention. Loading, you guys can read all the tiny little factoids that are popping up on the screen. If you guys caught the last one, they didn't use napkins to wipe their fingers, they used bread. And then they would feed the bread to their dogs. That's how they wiped their hands. Alright, here we go. Now, immediately you guys can probably notice geographically a little bit different. So the island of Crete was very, very rocky. It was very dry, arid, very, very typical for that type of an island in the Mediterranean. But for this tour, we are not on an island. We're actually on the Greek mainland on the Peloponnese. Now, we can still see the Aegean, which is right over here. But for the most part, the landscape and the geography is similar yet different. On the Greek mainland, they tended to grow trees called olive trees. So if you guys are big fans of olives, the Greeks loved olives. It was a major export of theirs, as well as olive oil. And we have our friend Herodotus once again. So let's go ahead and start our tour.
Welcome, traveler, to the ruins of Mycenae.
All right.
It is humbling to stand in the remnants of such a great civilization. Looking at these ruins, I am reminded that the past is never as far behind us as we think.
Alright, so he didn't dive too much in, so let's go ahead and start.
These are the ruins of Mycenae, center of the old Mycenaean civilization. It was home to great warriors and heroes. In many ways, places like Athens and Sparta stand on the shoulders of its accomplishments. This tour will take you through its ruins and introduce you to its most important monuments, revealing its history in the process. I hope you enjoy yourself. I'll be waiting for you at the end of your visit.
Alright, and Herodotus is exactly right. I mean, you wouldn't really have an Athens or a Sparta or these great city-states that were eventually going to develop without focusing on the Mycenaean civilization. These guys are the ones that kind of set the stage along with the Minoans.
The Mycenaean Civilization flourished in the Late Bronze Age between 1600 and 1200 BCE. During this period, it was mainly located in the Peloponnese and central Greece. Mycenaeans were known for exploring distant lands. Notably, they battled the Hittite-allied city of Volusa in a conflict that was believed to be the inspiration for Homer's Trojan War. But the Mycenaean people didn't only travel to fight. They learned much from their neighbors, the Minoans of Crete, such as how to write syllabic script on clay tablets. Such tablets provide evidence that Mycenaeans spoke an early form of Greek. They also tell of how great Mycenaean kings ruled over their warriors from opulent palaces in places like Mycenae, Thebes, and Knossos.
All right, a lot of good information here. If we think back to our text that we read in our book, we learned that the Mycenaean people were a militaristic people, meaning they relied heavily on their military. But that doesn't mean that they were all war all the time. They did a lot of traveling extensively, and they ended up creating a lot of trade networks throughout the Greek mainland, as well as throughout a lot of the islands in the Aegean and Mediterranean. What we're going to learn a lot more is regarding a man by the name of Homer. And I'm not talking Homer Simpson. Homer was a poet, a Greek poet. And what he did, he took a lot of historical liberties to a lot of things. And he created some epic poems that told a lot of war stories and tales. And raise your hand if you've ever heard of the Trojan horse. Okay. Couple of you. Good. Trojan horse is tied to the Trojan War. And Homer developed this idea of the Trojan War in one of his epic poems, but it's based on historical facts regarding the Hittite people and their city of Volusa. All right, so that's something to definitely keep in mind, that a lot of historical things are then put into almost kind of like historical fiction epic poems.
The entrance to Agamemnon's citadel, or the Lion Gate, is one of the most iconic monuments in Mycenae. It is impressive for both its height and for the intimidating rendering on its relief, which depicts two lions standing on either side of a column. Unfortunately, the lions' heads, which were presumably made of a precious metal or higher quality stone, have been lost to time. The gate was most likely meant to greet a triumphant king returning home from successful military campaigns and to awe foreign visitors.
As I've said to the other classes, when I win the lottery, I want a gate like that. Pretty awesome. So we can even look at what that gate looks like today. We kind of saw that last week in one of our video clips that we watched. It's pretty impressive. Says a lot about their architectural prowess too. I mean, this was something that generally wasn't done during this time.
When these shafts were discovered by archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann in 1876, he believed the 6 gold-filled graves to be connected with the family of the great king Agamemnon, even going so far as to proclaim a gold mask he found within to be the death mask of Agamemnon. However, this was refuted by later excavations, which showed that the 19 bodies buried in the shafts dated back to a few hundred years before Agamemnon was even born. In fact, at the time of the body's burial, the Lion Gate and the citadel walls had not even been built yet. It's estimated that the people in the graves were members of the first Mycenaean dynasty. The graves later became a place of worship for Mycenaean kings, who raised walls to protect them. These walls helped preserve several incredible artifacts, including women's jewelry, death masks, and masterfully crafted weapons.
And this says a lot about early societies and their worship of, royalty that had passed away and how they honor them. And the Mycenaean people eventually began kind of worshiping their dead royalty, their dead kings, their dead queens. A lot of cultures did that back in the day. We kind of see that with the Egyptian people. We see that with the Aztec. They did much of the same thing.
By 1250 BCE, Mycenae was at the height of its power, and its living quarters and workshops were numerous. Houses were built everywhere, from the top of the palace's hill near the king's residence, to the slopes and terraces within the walls, to the nearby hills outside the citadel. At one point, the citadel's walls even had to be enlarged to make room for more quarters. The people who lived inside the citadel were those with high status in either the military, religious, or administrative sectors of the kingdom. This is reflected by the ceramic and metal vessels inside the houses, as well as their painted plastered walls.
This was something that was also very common too in a lot of early civilizations, where people of higher status, of higher ranking, so like kings and royal families, priests, higher ranking military leaders, these people tended to be very well protected within the city. So these people lived within the walls of the citadel, whereas common folk and common people were the ones that were living outside of these major citadel walls. So if the city was ever attacked, the common folk would then enter the citadel for protection. What's up, dude? You know anything about this place? No? Okay.
A traveler seeking an audience with the king would have first ascended a steep ramp from the Lion Gate to the citadel's summit. Here, they would have walked into the palatial complex through a grand entrance called the Propylon. Once inside, their gaze would immediately be drawn to the palace's main hall, a monumental area known as the Megaron. The vividly decorated Megaron, which glittered with precious objects and colorful frescoes in its heyday, was where the king would have received the traveler. If the king was feeling generous, he would have shared with the visitor the palace's most marvelous feature, its commanding and majestic view, which stretched from the plain of Argolis to the gleaming Aegean Sea.
So a lot of kings, a lot of leaders tended to do this. Their palaces were grand. And they did this on purpose because anytime that there was any type of guest, it really I am in charge. This is how much power, this is how much wealth I have.
It was in this palace where a legendary Mycenaean king like Agamemnon would have held court. According to Homer and other poets, Agamemnon led the Greeks in the sack of Troy. Stories say that he was a fearsome warrior on par with Achilles, but also an overly ambitious and arrogant ruler. He sacrificed his own daughter, Iphigenia, to convince Artemis to grant his ship's passage to Troy. After conquering the city, he returned to Mycenae with mounds of riches, and a Trojan named Cassandra as his concubine. Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, was not pleased with her husband's sacrifice of their daughter. She plotted to murder her husband out of anger. The plot was successful, and, depending on the version of the story, Agamemnon was either murdered in his bath by Clytemnestra or killed by his cousin Aegisthus during a banquet.
something we also see in a lot of stories and myths from back then. So Agamemnon sacrificed his own daughter to Artemis in order to be given safe passage across the sea. Wow. What a bad dad. He got his comeuppance, though. His wife ended up plotting to assassinate him and was successful. So, now, boys and girls, this is the end of this tour, which only means one thing. It's quiz time, boys and girls. So hopefully you all paid attention. The man, the myth, the legend, Herodotus is going to quiz you. We are conducting it just like we did last time. So pay attention to the question. We'll go through the answers. Whatever answer you think is the correct answer, raise your hand, and that will determine what everyone says. So here we go.
You've completed the tour. I trust it was an eye-opening experience. Though it did not last, Mycenae was a sort of precursor to what would eventually become the Greek civilization we know today. It's important we remember them, if only to avoid repeating their mistakes. Now, what else would you like to do?
I would like to quiz the children. So here we go. Pay attention to the question.
Then let's begin. First, I have quite a simple question. Which ancient city may have been the inspiration for Homer's depiction of Troy?
Alright, was it the city of Wilusa? Mycenae? Thebes? Or Knossos? Alright, let's see what Mrs. Del Real's class says. Yeah, same over here, Mrs. Del Real. Correct answer is Wilusa. As mentioned in the very beginning.
The Mycenaeans' conflict with the city of Wilusa allegedly inspired Homer's Trojan War. Now, for the second question. Agamemnon sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia to convince which god to allow him to proceed to Troy?
Alright, bad dad. Agamemnon sacrificed his daughter to what god or goddess? Was it Apollo? Athena? Ares? Or Artemis? Alright, let's see what Mrs. Del Real's class says.
Iphigenia to reconcile with Artemis, who then allowed his ships to pass to Troy. Now, one last question. What was the name of Agamemnon's Trojan concubine?
What was the name of his concubine? Was it Clytemnestra? Iphigenia? Cassandra? Menelaus? Ooh, there was like no hands raised on this one, so let's try this again.
What was the name of Agamemnon's Trojan concubine?
Clytemnestra, Iphigenia, Cassandra, Menelaus. All right, Mrs. Del Real, how did your kids do on this one? Oh, Mrs. Del Real's class got this one right, and we did not. Answer is Cassandra.
Correct. Following the sack of Troy, Agamemnon sailed home with the Trojan prophetess named Cassandra. You've studied the ruins well, traveler.
All right, boys and girls, that is it for now.
Then, I suppose this is farewell.
This is the end of this stream. We will pick
now.
up with our next one, more than likely on Friday, regarding Athenian democracy. Keep doing what you're doing, and you guys all have a great mythical Monday.